So we're back with Pat and Kirsty, and now we're standing in what is going to be the most abundant field of awesome veggies in a few months' time. So guys, what are we looking at here?
So we sort of, not like, a lot of people are using a fellow JM Fortier, his model at the moment,
Right.
which is sort of like having separate plots, using tarps to kill the grass.
Okay.
A sort of a no-till
Yep.
method, which is really like, if you really want to get to the nitty-gritty, it's like a minimum till really.
Sure.
Using like small tilters, occasional like small like walk behind tractor use, not necessarily a rotary hoe or a rotary tiller, but like a plow on the back or a flail mower or something like that.
Yep.
But this is our first plot. We tarped it last summer, maybe in the summer before.
Yeah, I lost track. Where are we? 2020.
Yeah, they
So
sort of have blended into one.
2018 to 19.
It was 18 to
19. Yeah.
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 And it was, and so we probably wouldn't tarp in the summer again.
That's I remember coming
was
down. You
too
explained to me that
dry.
it got
Yeah, so
And-
that was a really dry summer.
Yeah.
Oh, of course, that was horrific. That was
Yeah.
That's
And we put the tarps down at end of Jan, maybe?
Yeah, maybe even
2019?
slightly before.
Yeah.
And I guess we should say that tarping is in lieu of, is to say you don't spray. It's to so you avoid herbicides.
It's a pretty like zero effort way of getting rid of the lawn, really. Like you put the tarp down, it solarizes it, and then you can peel it back and
Yeah, but without any moisture below the tarp, I think it just nuked everything, including the biology in the soil.
Yeah.
And I think it's compacted it. Like it's all like the structure's almost fallen on itself. So
It's this is really interesting.
we think our second plot in comparison seems to be the soil seems to
So
be much
is this
better.
where
You can get a broad fork in much more easily.
is
you
this
can't get a broad fork deeper than 10 centimeters in here.
even now?
We
Oh,
haven't
we
tried
haven't tried
it
in
for a
about a
while.
year.
Maybe since it's had some water on it, and it's funny, things wouldn't like not much grew here for a while on this plot specifically.
Yeah,
We're not
for
sure if
about
that
6 months, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But sorry, after it had been tarped,
After we
solarized.
tarped, you normally get some seeds coming up that haven't germinated.
Oh, I see. I mean, it's worth sort of workshopping this a bit right now,
Yeah.
because it actually cooked the seed bank as well? Is that
Potentially.
Yeah, potentially. I don't think it would get quite hot enough for that.
Okay, yeah.
You'd have to get 70 or 80 degrees the soil, wouldn't it?
true?
seeds.
That's very. Of course, you're right.
Normally,
But
what would happen if you got moisture in there, and it's dark,
Yeah.
the tarp, obviously it's dark in the
Yeah.
soil. It promotes germination, and then you germinate, not get any light, and then die off. That's normally how you kill the seed bank off under a tarp, I'd say.
right, because you get germination and then it dies, and
Yeah.
that's the killing process.
that's-
I mean, I guess. A couple of things that I'm interested in. One is that there was an Italian researcher at Burnley. You might have had a guest lecture from Alessandro Sala, who was very into the soil biology thing, and his view was that Australian soils are so driven by moisture or not that as long as there's an area in under shade or there's moisture under a log, microorganisms will reinvade very quickly,
Yeah.
right, once the moisture returns.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, so I'm hoping on your behalf that that's what's happened here. The other thing is that's interesting, you guys can talk about this, the soil type itself. This is basalt soil.
Yep.
And I know, because I had the same soil in Alphington for many years, it does crack horrifically, like when it's dry.
Yeah, I live around the corner, and
Yeah.
it looks like an earthquake's come through. Sometimes
Exactly.
especially if you get a big wet spell and then it dries, and you
Yeah.
get water for a while. We're actually lucky here. I think that it used to be a sports oval, and
Right.
so there's actually quite a thick layer of sand because it's been top dressed for
Oh,
so many
wow.
years.
Wow.
So we haven't noticed any cracking here
Okay.
yet, and we think it might aid with some drainage rather than having sort of that heavy clay. But once you do get down 10 or 15 centimetres, you do hit that.
Yeah, that reminds me to ask you, of course, the great fear with urban agriculture always is soil contamination,
Yeah.
right? So what happened with
That
you?
was luckily the very first thing we did.
Yeah.
Was, and
Macquarie University.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they have a system program where you can take 5 soil samples. This is meant to be just a backyard thing.
Yeah.
And you can get them tested for contamination. And like we came back negative for all.
Wow, that's everything: cadmium, lead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we don't know the full colonial what happened.
Yeah.
Here, often you get these spaces and they've had a tip on
Sure.
the site, especially because there's a waste transfer station right next door. But from the history that we can find from the last 150 years, don't know that it's.
That's a great. It's always a fascinating question. I mean, the sort of post-European history, I guess.
Yeah.
If it wasn't houses, it would have just been grazing, I guess. Yeah.
We think cattle.
Someone has said to us dairy farm
Yeah.
is around
The
here.
community garden mentioned that it
did a
was
lot of
a dairy farm, or at least some sort of cattle on the site early on in the European
Because
history.
this suburbia here is, well, that's all new, but that's sort of what, 1930s, is it, or
and then
40s?
I guess Heidelberg West only, the suburb over was the 1956 Olympic Village.
Right.
Well, most of it,
Yeah.
I guess, if it was the Olympic Village, it was probably pretty empty up until 1956.
So that's the place to buy uncontaminated soil. Unless it was like my childhood in the 70s when you had the backyard incinerator and you burnt batteries and God knows what I'm full of. Terrific. Gen X, fun times. Exactly. You're full of glyphosate, I'm full of cadmium probably. All right, let's just sort of wander over because it actually that in the distance there, it actually looks like a sort of no-till crop stubble. Is that sort of literally what that is in a sense?
Yeah, I think maybe we tried to put a cover crop in there.
Right.
This one, yeah. So that we put a cover crop in. We haven't had much luck with cover crops here. We think that we tried to rake it in as best we could.
Right.
We get some germination, but not as much as we thought. We think the birds are getting it. No irrigation, so dry land farming, basically what we're doing now.
Yep.
We had a lot of success with chia seed.
Right.
It got to, I can send you a photo, but
Yep.
got to overhead height, this chia, and our one lonely sunflower.
Sunflower didn't get eaten. Had he left it when he was cutting down the
this is the attack of the cockatoos you were telling me?
Yeah.
Or corellas, or both, probably.
Yeah, probably both.
But I remember driving past about an hour or two after you'd finished putting seed out one time, and it was just birds everywhere.
That's it.
Yeah, that's wow. So I mean, this is way down the track and probably not on the radar now. But if let's say you had a few sites in a few years' time, and would you ever considered like protected cropping, like mossy willow, for example?
Yeah, I think a netting system on a small scale is something you need to do anyway. Especially for cabbage moth, not just for birds. I know that mossy do use the netting for cabbage moth mostly to get sort of brassicas started in late summer for autumn and winter harvest.
We certainly found that, I have to admit, by accident with the netting on the plot program that we do at Burnley.
For the ducks.
Well, yeah, which by the way, it was a rogue pair this year. I actually caught them. I filmed it. They're quite funny videos that I've just sort of, even as I chased them, they kept trying to have another last peck. And it was the broccoli. They were just, I don't know what it was.
I love the broccoli. I think it used to get all stunted.
Oh, it was anyway. But obviously the point is the netting that we do for the ducks definitely, keeps the cabbage white out. So, all right. So,
shall I run through?
Yeah,
some,
please.
Like plot sizes.
Absolutely.
So I think we're going to have eight plots of the same size. I think that's pretty important if you are going to start a market garden or even a space at home, is to have everything the same size.
Yeah.
At least the length of your row. It then becomes a measuring tool.
Oh, okay.
So if you say 20 metre bed, you can fit 60 broccoli plants in there. That then becomes, one row is 60, 2 rows is 120. It makes planning
very
a
routine,
lot
very
easier. You can have the same size netting. Every plot has the same irrigation configuration, tarp size. You can have. We're going to have a couple of smaller plots for sort of, salad leaves.
Okay.
That we'll use, but to fit the same plot size in your space is, I think, we think really important. We're using 75 centimeter width beds, which I think, well, I'm not sure a lot of people have used them, but sort of came about with Elliot Coleman in the 1970s and 80s. He started making tools specifically for a 75 centimeter bed, and so it's sort of been taken by most small scale farmers. I know some people that, will have slightly larger, maybe 1 meter, but a lot of the small scale tools, like we were talking about TerraTech, and Johnny's got a tilther. They're all either 32.5 centimeters, so you go up and down, or a 75 centimeter wide implement on the back of a
yeah. And the first time I realised that there was this whole 75 centimeter thing was actually that Pocket City Farm in Sydney.
Yeah.
They seem to.
Interestingly, they've just changed.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
right.
They have a lot of volunteers through, so what they've done is slightly widen the bed, but also slightly widen their pathways. The standard pathway is like a 17 or 18 inch, which is what, like 30 centimetre. They've actually gone to a slightly larger, maybe like 45 centimetre path to get people through. And 1 metre.
That's pretty hard to work. Like you'd be stomping on the other. Your heels would be on the other bed.
Yeah. And if you're used to it, you can get through. A lot of people straddle the bed. That's why 75 centimetres is good as well. So you can have feet in either side of the bed in the pathway.
Right.
I know Sim at Spoken Spade, he's got like 20 centimetre or 25 centimetre because he's working on a really small scale.
Sure.
And then at Beals Road Farm, another farm that I work at, we work with people with intellectual disability, and we want to get wheelchairs down, so we're a 90 centimetre path. So it's to suit your space, but generally 75 centimetre bed seems to be the way to go.
Really interesting. And just talking about the bed system, what about actually crop choice itself? If we go back to the fact that this is a special school, and my understanding is it's actually quite ethnically diverse.
Yeah.
So I mean, so of course your fundraising model again is so fascinating, because it's like, the way I would describe it is feed the school but feed the community as well.
Yeah.
So what's your thinking around, I don't know, the notion of culturally appropriate food, or you don't even put it in those terms, it's like, what do you think you'll grow?
Yeah, well, there's a bit of I think for us it's definitely a combination thing. So a priority in sort of us being financially viable means that we've got to have those crops that are, like microgreens is something that, takes up space in the nursery but doesn't take up any space in the ground. And we're in such close proximity to the chefs and cafes and restaurants.
And the margin on microgreens
is huge, and so like
Might get you guys to break the social distancing a little bit, just so I can have you in frame. Beautiful. Yeah,
so combining some of those things, and even like greens and the markup on lettuce and stuff like that, even though it's a high, like it takes a lot to pick and pack and wash and all of that kind of stuff, as opposed to a pumpkin where you just go along and pick it up and away you go. But combining, I think we see this space as somewhere where we have a combination of the things that are a little bit more culturally appropriate, or some unusual foods in there with the things that we just know are going to be able to sort of be your bread and butter, I guess.
So the bread and butter is the salads stuff, the basic
salads, carrots, things that will people that most people will buy and recognise.
Yeah.
There are a few, like I know Curtis Stone in Canada has a formula to work out if it's going to be financially viable for him, and it's a lot of that like very high turnover, quick growing crops. Like he does a lot of baby kale, a lot of salad greens, radishes, things like that you can you might be able to get 6 to 7 crops into one bed per year. But that's I think crop diversity is a good thing. It's also got to be financially viable. You've got to have a market for it. But a lot of small scale farms are also doing this sort of, steal from the rich, give to the poor. So you can sell at like quite high prices to restaurants, and then to keep your food, cheaper for the masses, I guess, and to be able to grow some of the culturally appropriate foods that might not have a large market, but are still important to grow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I guess if you take Fair Share, for example, whether it's Victoria Park or down in Heatherton, they only grow, so 4 or 5 crops at a time on 1,000 square metres. it'll be eggplants, sweet potatoes, carrots, whatever. I mean, there just is that feeling that it's just too hard. You just get overwhelming if you're trying to cater for every single taste or interest in a crop. Is that what you're saying? Like, you're just going to be very, you'll have some formula for. Hello, dogs. A bit of a break from being serious. Look at that. And yes, good move. Okay. Yeah. So
it's things like growing sprouting broccoli instead of heading broccoli.
Okay.
Like, you know, making those decisions where a sprouting broccoli plant will be in all autumn and winter. You might get, I don't know, people will know how many bunches you'll get out of one sprouting broccoli.
Now this is very topical for me because I've become addicted to both baby broccoli and broccolini, and I don't quite know the difference.
I think it's the same.
You can't go. It's the same.
Yeah.
You can't go back.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
I'm done. Except for the Burnley stuff that students grow, which I will be eating if you don't come and pick it. That's everyone listening at home. That's it. That's a wrap for me.
Yeah.
Are you the same? Pretty.
Oh no, I'm not fussed.
Okay, well done.
Of any sort is.
Really?
No,
I'm.
the stems.
No, I'm done. That's it.
Real hot and olive oil.
Raw or cooked. So is that that's what you're talking about with stem broccoli?
Yeah.
So you're talking about both the fact that people will buy it,
Yep.
but also it's kind of producing a lot from one plant.
Again and again.
There's like a heading broccoli is in the ground for 12 to 14 weeks. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
And you get one good head, and you might get a couple of sprouts.
You might
just
get
some
sell that
smaller
for $6
heads.
a head, $8
Yeah.
a head, and then as opposed to a bunch of broccoli, sprouting broccoli.
That's in the ground for maybe 24 to 30 weeks, and you can have a constant pick.
Yeah.
It's making those small decisions on a small scale that can mean go from not making any money to making money.
Sure, and also I know you guys talking to Sim from Spoken Spade and the Children's Farm, but we've been chatting recently about this very idea of specialisation. So I'm 100% on board with his idea of becoming the rhubarb specialist, right? Because for those who love rhubarb, they'll always pay a premium.
Yeah.
And I sent them a photo the other day. I weighed a bunch, at Coles at Northcote Plaza was $6. I weighed it, it was 500 grams. That's $12 a kilo.
Yeah.
That's not bad. And if you add to that the fact that there's, different varieties that you could sort of, add a premium to that, saying this is Wandon Red or Sydney Crimson or whatever else it is. So that's a really interesting idea, right? So,
Is it Di's rhubarb in the market? What's the rhubarb?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, you have to battle with her.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, well, that's right. But I mean, it's. Anyway, you're obviously doing a lot of thinking about it. What about just initially? Are you going to have some people, and especially if it's sort of so-called virgin soil or whatever. You might put in potatoes, pumpkins, sweet potatoes, just things that are kind of large and easy to manage in the first year, or that's not what you're thinking. You're just going straight into
I think we're just going to go straight in.
Yeah.
We haven't had any nutrient testing done on the soil.
Okay.
Well, we probably will do that. I guess we're going down to biological fertility, I guess, rather than using bulk. We'll use a lot with some bulk compost to start, but we want to be able to work in a way where we can cover crop. Kirsty, has a family history in biodynamics.
I'm not allowed to mention that because I used to bring it up in every single lecture. I'll
true.
just let you guys. This you still remember.
You did get banned.
What a nightmare! What a nightmare!
How did you brought it up this time? So it's
Yeah, exactly. So this is so you can say Mark Rathbone, Save Our Soil up at Echuca there.
Yeah, and biodynamics, they don't use compost, they don't use any manures, apart from what they put in the cow horns. So you see the food and it tastes so good.
It is literally unbelievable. It is just so
low inputs. Trying to get fertility off your own site. There's a lot of I've been doing some research on Korean natural farming or jajam, which uses indigenous microorganisms, trying to capture them in a concentrated form and then using that as a fertilizer. The last one I read, boiling potatoes or something starchy with some leaf mold from the area, often in a forest, or we could use just a small area of our farm, and then they put it in a tub of water basically, or a barrel of water, and then they let the microorganisms from the leaf mold feed on the starch and sugars. Oh, you put salt in it as well. You put half a kilo of salt, and then you end up with this like lots of microorganisms in the water.
So this is, I'm rereading a book called The Hidden Half of Nature, which I've recommended to the students in this class, which I can't remember whether I was on that hobby horse when you guys were finishing. It's by, anyway, he's a popular science writer. He's a geologist, his wife's a biologist, and they've written it together, and it covers actually the whole soil science issue with microorganisms plus gut health, because she got cancer and had to work a lot of stuff out. But anyway, so that's 5 years old, and I'm sure the science is increasing, but what it's kind of saying is we know more and more about what you're talking about, but there's still so far to go. So the issue seems to be that, what's the easiest way to sum this up? There are microorganisms in the soil all the time. It's not a great mystery. Whether we'll ever describe them is another question. But if you do it, it's sort of like, I guess if you tweak it the right way, they're going to be extracting nutrients so efficiently that you really can. That seems to be the only explanation for why biodynamic works.
I'm so I'm quite confused at the moment. The best way to gain fertility from the soil, because it should, like, from what you read and you hear, it should be here already. We don't need to add chicken manure for nitrogen and all these other things. It should be able to hear, and if you can mine it efficiently, I guess, with the microorganisms in the soil, it's just how to create the environment for them to do that.
And training, not training, but there is the concept around having your plants, if they're fed by these really like water soluble nutrients, or you've got your chicken manure and your stuff that's really readily available for them, then them as a plant become a little bit lazy, because it's like,
well, as I read the other day, Jane Loudon, who wrote a book for kids gardening in 1855, described that very issue back then. She said, your plants will become like fat asthmatic lap dogs. So I think when I read that, I thought, God, that's fat asthmatic lap dog shaming in 1855. But anyway,
you think about the evolution of food and how it's all changed, especially over the last 100 years, and it's like, people have been cultivating and growing food for thousands and thousands of years, and it's this thing of, we didn't have access to all of those things before, and food and plants were still able to be produced and feed humanity, and
absolutely, but
why, it's just that we've become reliant on it, and it's this thing drummed into us that it's like we've got to build this fertility in the soil. But it's that question is like,
I mean, it's a tricky one, because obviously for thousands of years in India and China, people added manure, and in China particularly human manure, right? They didn't muck around. So again, this is almost a philosophical discussion. It's fascinating, because it really comes down to how much yield you need, right? Like if you're the more of your population that doesn't grow any of its own food, the more you have to get out of the soil, I guess. So so again, like Pat's saying, or you're saying, I'm still confused too. I guess adding the input of the manure, say you had a few cows here, would feed the organisms to then feed the plants, microorganisms. So
the plants themselves feed microorganisms.
True. So then you get into that's right. So the ultimate agroecological approach is, of course, the crop. It's what you do with your crop residues. So how do you cycle?
And it's building a cover crop system into a small scale, which is
our biggest
very
challenge.
rare. Like, it's almost not done.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I know,
and that's going to be fun.
Speaking to Kirsty's uncle, who is the biodynamic farmer. He was sort of thinking with us, could we grow a 2 to 3 inch cover crop and then turn it in? Could you do that once a year instead of doing a cover crop every 2 to 3 years to grow for a whole season? Will it have the same effect? It might not have the effect of large,
really deep
root systems, but it gives you a
carbon in the soil.
And a very high species of plants.
Well, what about, if I'm just going to pan across while I mention this idea, if you have the space, what if you grew perennial woody cover crops, so like certain types of acacias that you could coppice, right? So you could then I mean, you know, they're incredible nitrogen fixers.
Yeah, I've been thinking we're going to hopefully have a few hedgerows through, and we'd like to use indigenous plants and potentially some plants that we can pick from as well in the hedgerows. But yeah, adding small trees like acacias for the nitrogen fixing capability, but also for the habitat for birds.
Sure.
And we'll see, will the shade from a 6 to 7 metre acacia or even smaller affect our crops or not? What is
well, if they're close to them, the answer is yes. I can tell you categorically now. Yeah, but I mean, wow. Yeah, I just back to this yield thing. You've really got me on a real sort of thought something here. I mean, yeah, because I guess the basic principle, isn't it, that if you're taking the crop away, you are, you're taking and then you're taking the crop residue off. That is a nutrient deficit, I think, right? Isn't it? So I guess that's right. Perennial systems, in theory, they can become more or less nutrient self-sufficient, I guess. But if you actually take the whole plant out, you've got to replace something. Maybe.
Yeah, and a lot of people now are not taking a root system, but rather cutting at the surface, leaving the root system in.
I know Charlotte's into that because she made me do that at the Northcote pool.
Yeah.
I pulled them out later. Oops, sorry. Tell her. Oops.
I think that's like
right.
Who say that they've got a population of organisms in the soil that actually breaks down really quickly once you do cut it. I'm not 100% sure. I've tried to do that with cauliflowers and cabbages, and it just regrows. They just reshoot.
Yeah, that's why I yanked them out.
I got cabbages coming up this year from last year.
Yeah, and then also if you're taking, say, you've got a broccoli or cauliflower left over from when you harvest, you can flail mower that in, and it comes down. You can almost compost in situ.
Gotcha.
Rather than taking it off to, say, a compost bay. Yeah,
it's so. I mean, maybe you guys are about to sort of crack the secret of this. This could be like the.
Well, it's going to be some good trial and error. Doing the.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people trying to crack it already. So you can take bits and pieces from a lot of small successful farms. Even here in Australia, there's lots of successful farms. To then implement it on ours. I mean.
But actually, just revisiting what I said. I mean, I guess the theory or the basic principle is you take the crop off. If you're managing a soil well, you still have to put something back. But then you think, like you say, you talk about, say, Mark Rathbone or other biodynamic farmers. What they literally don't put in anything except the 500 formula. Is that right?
And they cover crop.
And they cover crop.
Yeah,
okay.
So they'll turn the cover crop in, and that's why we would like to use that system rather than adding.
Yeah.
So adding the cover crop residue in, whether you could do that on a small scale, because if you're not picking from that bed, it's potentially worth nothing, but in the long run, is it worth something to you because your crops?
Well, we've started doing it a bit more systematically at Burnley now in the student plots, and so now with Rowan Berry on board, and I felt this year the crops actually. I mean, it was all a bit stuffed up because of the pandemic, but because the cover crops were tilled in quite late, so close to students putting in their crops. Then we had this sort of weird summer rain and autumn rain. I feel like the yield's slightly down this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
For example, normally even if you have a horrible dry summer, you put in those broccoli, the heads are gigantic there, right? And we know it's got very good inherent fertility down there. Actually quite high N. That's the tested 5 years ago, right? Anyway, I just wondered whether there was a process where with the extra moisture in the soil, the cover crops were breaking down and actually meant that the crops were competing with that. The microorganisms were too busy breaking down, old lupins or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I don't know. See, there's always so much conjecture, isn't there, when you...
There's always, in that station, there's always, the ground's always covered. It's never really...
That's a really good point. As I actually did, Rowan, I over the years, I've realised, and Nick, who used to be in the nursery, agreed that the weeds are a cover crop.
Yeah.
I mean, those malva, when you plough them in.
Yeah, root systems are...
and they're deep, yeah.
Yeah, we've been looking at perennial cover crops.
Right.
So Elaine Ingham...
Soil lady, famous soil lady, isn't she?
Yeah,
Yep.
she's sort of, and I think Christine Jones as well.
Right.
They're being championed, these perennial cover crops. Actually, one indigenous to here, Dichondra repens.
Yeah.
To plant that out to have your soil covered perennially, I guess, and then plant and to plant into that.
And because you can just literally pull it apart. It's not a hard plant.
That could be.
And also isotomas as well. They're saying it could be used. So something that doesn't climb on the plants. So like chickweed or whatever, it's great. It's a great cover, but it eventually engulfs your whole plant. Whereas Dichondra, it's a 1 inch.
And I guess is the argument that it has a shallow root system?
No, it has a deep root system.
Oh.
It's one of it's Elanium's done like all these tests across the globe of all these different ground covers that don't climb, that have these like admirable traits that you want in a sort of, I guess, an intercropping system.
Yeah.
And that was always the thing, that you end up with such a shallow plant that you have the shallow root system. And out of all of them, it was like Dichondra.
Yeah. So meaning that it's not going to compete with a lettuce that has a relatively shallow system.
Yeah, and it's constantly putting root exudates into the soil to feed those microorganisms.
This is all very next level. I mean, it's just good agroecological design. And
building that into it, like we've had a conversation about trying to build that into, it works with some of your bigger crops, like you got your broccoli or your cauliflower, but trying to have something like Dichondra growing between a lettuce crop.
Rocket, and trying to like harvest rocket, or even get seeds in that space.
Yeah, how do you direct seed into something?
Which is, wow. So this is why often people just go back to the good old fashioned thousands of years of just having rows and right, like it's
till it in.
Yeah, it's well, as I've heard many people say over the years, actually it was anyway. A lot of farmers globally are very aware. You either have really good soil, or you have shit. There is such a thing as shit soil.
Yeah.
Right. Some soils that are deeply glaciated, metre deep, free draining. Yeah. Right. Like that sort of stuff in China. Let's say they've been farming that for thousands of years, like hardcore. That you can't sort of beat that.
Yeah.
So. Wow, well, I'm sort of now in such a fog of thinking and so many different tangents that I'm going to have to, I think I'm just going to have to stop.
Yeah, that's
I mean, this has just been so interesting.
And I mean, while we have been working on farms as just farm hands, and Charlotte's been working as a manager at Mossy, we haven't had any of those like practical testing yet of any of our ideas. A lot of it's theoretical, a lot of it's like read, a lot of it's watched on videos, but I think until we have our own farm, test these techniques, potentially do some testing, we won't actually know what the best way forward is.
Sure. Do you need, how are you going with academic papers on this stuff? Like obviously you can always send me, I mean a lot of stuff you can get as PDFs now, but you have a lot of journal firewalls still, paywalls. Right, so if you ever use Scholar and look up some of this more, the science on this, which often is useless sometimes because it's so pure, right? It's not applied, but still, just email me and I can download them through the university. Yep. So, but certainly there's a lot. Thankfully, there's so much more interest now in microbiology generally. And look, and a couple of years ago we had a student in my master's food production class who was a global expert. Can you believe it? She's actually still in Australia. Sandhya. She was from India, and she's certainly really cluey on just nitrogen fixation, how that works in big cropping systems. But she's done a lot of work on mycorrhizae and phosphate uptake.
Amazing.
So maybe I'll get her out here one day.
I shouldn't say on a Melbourne Uni.
Oh no, go for it.
We've had the Trobe Uni out here.
Oh, that's all right. God, I don't care.
Yeah, they were like we quite like because this is sort of their
So there's
zone.
a bit of dog fertility going on. Sorry.
Yeah, maybe we just get a pack of dogs.
Sorry, well, the Trobe are.
They were thinking about helping us out with some of the fertility. They were going to deep rip the soil and put like a chicken manure down, like 60, 70 centimeters, and then grow like a wheat cover crop or something like that they do on broadacre.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, really cool.
But who does that on a broadacre? Put deep till, sure, but not with manure, chicken manure.
Yeah, like it's high nutrients.
They
like
did like channels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I can't
So
remember
they
his
go
name
down
now.
like a meter.
We were going to do that on that part, and we just,
Okay.
you know, with all our delays, we haven't
Yeah.
resurfaced that.
So it was the concept that like once you got the biology down
Yeah.
and you got the root systems down, that then it goes sideways.
Which is kind of like the Peter Somerville at Burnley, who did who's done a project with Peter May. What's that called? Deep, with just compost, green.
It's similar to
You
what
just
they were
get it
doing
in
there.
there in
As
random
deep as
patches, and
possible.
then
They went to increase your topsoil down to that high nutrient sort of core that they were putting in.
right.
And
Yeah.
the deep system of the wheat was meant to draw down to that like high nutrient core, and with it, you know, bring nutrients up and also,
Yeah.
you know, air spaces down. And it's a bit over the top of my head, but
No, I mean,
was-
look, yeah, it's just all too fascinating.
It is.
All right,
Whatever.
Pat and Kirsty, thank you so much. That was actually 35 minutes of chatting just then, so that's a big one. But yeah, any questions from students, say whether it's about the tarping or crop choice or the whole model, just email is okay, is it?
Yep, yeah.
All right.
I think we've got a couple of our email at the end of the lecture.
Okay, all right, well, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you.
ya.